Okay guys, welcome to my first ever attempt at recording a video here. I thought we'd start off with a little tutorial on how to draw Killeroo, or at least how I draw him. Let's see, so step one, pictures. Always look at photos of kangaroos when you're trying to draw a kangaroo, because I've been drawing kangaroos probably for the better part of 25 years and they haven't gotten any easier. So I particularly like looking at photos of red kangaroos when I'm looking for a reference for Killeroo, because they're very distinctive and they're quite different from the eastern grey kangaroo, particularly the way the ears and the front of the snout looks. So let's get started. Personally, I usually, because I've drawn him so many times, I start with the eyes, because they're probably the most different part of Rufus from a real kangaroo. So I'm basically drawing the eye ridges or the eyebrows here. You can notice that there's quite a like with human heads, there's usually like one eye's length in between both eyes, whereas with Rufus it's quite a bit more. So I generally make sure that the eyes are at least 2, sometimes even 3 eye widths apart. So drawing the eyelids. To add a little more character, I like to put like one eye ridge, sort of like the eyebrow raised a little. Just gives him a little more character. Then the scar is always on the right eye, and I always envision it as some sort of knife blade has gone across the top of his head, even part of the eye, and then down over the bottom of the eye. So I'll actually, when I'm drawing his eyeball, I do it much more faint and less defined, if you like. Because I imagine that time he got the scar must have damaged the eye to some degree. Even with his healing factor, it hasn't really fully healed. Just draw a bit more. Always have a nice bit of texture with the hair. Like the kangaroo's basically covered in this coarse kind of hair. Okay, so got that there. And the nose is kind of a round shape. It's not flat. So, and again with the snout, it's really down to the individual artist's interpretation. I don't make it quite as long a different distance from the eyes, which gives the impression that the snout is actually coming towards us a bit. And I don't completely follow the roughly the shape of the eye, the nose rather. I like to put this part here. I generally put a little more texture on the top of the nose there, and sort of the nostrils there. And this is another area where Killeroo deviates from what a real kangaroo looks like, because we can create a bit more character with the mouth. I generally make it so that the top part of the teeth must be under here, so we're really only seeing the lower gums of the bottom row of teeth underneath. It's sort of like a more humanoid lower lip there. And there's sort of this round shape here, so generally try to create that. And I'll have it tapering off into sort of whiskers towards the bottom. Give him a bit of a chin. I always like to give him a little bit of a goatee as well. Yeah, if we try and rough out the rest of the shape, we've got these nice tops areas here, so I'll sort of emulate those. And this line that comes pretty much right down the front of the snout. And the main thing I've learned with drawing roo ears is they kind of come out of these knuckles up here. So I'll generally draw them first, just sort of like a round area, which gives them the ability to pivot around on, because their ears can actually, well, I guess it's 180, so they can go from the back, and then they can be facing the front as well. That's another element that I generally use to add a bit more character, is I'll have the ears not facing exactly the same way. So with this one, it's kind of facing back, and when kangaroos are sort of showing interest or particularly fixated on something in front of them, because they rely on their hearing a lot, they'll actually pivot the ears forward, usually both at the same time, but I think it makes for a more visual image to have one back and one forward, whether it's anatomically correct or not. I mean, it's a comic book. Those ears are probably a bit too low on the top of their head, so I'm just gonna, it's the beauty of working digitally, I can just move them up a bit. Yeah, that's probably closer. So yeah, it's never perfect for a perfectionist, and the digital can let you make corrections on the fly as you go, rather than getting your eraser out, or traditional eraser anyway. So the ear length is also important. Sometimes people will draw them much bigger than they should be, and it kind of makes them look a little bit goofy. So again, using photo reference to determine the right proportions is the trick. Okay, we'll come back down a bit, and I think again I'll make another correction here and bring the snout a bit further forward towards the camera. Yeah. I'm using Manga Studio, and in particular the Frenden brushes for Manga Studio, which I've always liked the most. You get some nice comic book edges to it. So we get, you can get the really nice fine lines, and if you press a bit harder, you can get the more solid shapes like that. Generally sort of put a little kind of a cheekbone, because kangaroos and in particular Killeroo has a different facial structure. I give him they have this nice sort of round edge. I find that softens him a little bit too much, so I'll generally put like a harder edge to the chin, and I always give him a nice thick neck, almost like a tree trunk. It gives him a look of strength. These eyes are probably a little bit too far apart, but with every sketch you do, I always put a bit of whiskers on the edge there. And I'm not sure what these are actually called, but there's always these markings that sort of flow out from the middle of the nose there, mouth. And generally there's a couple of whiskers here and there. Give me a bit of a facial growth. Yeah, it's starting to take shape. Looking again at the picture, you can see there's some light highlights that show up on the top. So I'll leave like a white space there and taper it down. And there's also kind of a shape to the nostrils. You can see that middle bit there. So I'll get a thicker brush later and fill this in properly. But that's the main source of the dark areas on the front of the face. These big sort of muscles and the chin and Adam's apple and everything goes sort of under in there. And then sort of taper out to the traps on the side. And I always give him a little bit of a tuft of hair at the base of that. And then the start of the pecs there. And again, always a little bit of texture, stubble, if you like, to sort of show. I mean, you can go a bit overboard at times, and I know I'm guilty of that, of just putting in too much individual little hairs. And those eyes are bugging me. I'm going to move them in a bit. This one's actually not too bad as this one, so yeah, that's about right. Always a bit more texture at the top to sort of show the light is hitting the front of his face here, so as it gets closer towards the back we can show a bit more fur towards the back. The underside of the ear is always a bit darker, and I'll generally draw lines that are sort of all pointing in towards about here in the middle of the ear at the base. Put a nice little nick in the ear like you had an earring and it's been ripped out in a fight or something. A few extra whiskers just down here near the base of the ear. The more lines you put in here on the top of the brow, the angrier it'll start to look. We've got a shadow caused by the eyebrow ridge there, so put a bit of dark shadowing under there. And that's about it. Hopefully I'll get better at recording these videos as we go along. It's not something I'm accustomed to, but hopefully that gives you a bit of an insight into at least the basics of how I draw Killeroo. And I hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you.